Hi everyone, it's Dr. Andrew Layne with Layne Performance, and I want to talk about an article that was just put out by the National Strength Conditioning Association. It's called Correcting Misconceptions in the Knowledge of Personal Trainers, and it's by Dan Jolly. And it talks about a couple things that I've always had on my mind about personal training. I've been a certified personal trainer for almost 20 years now, which is far too long for my age, even though I'm starting to get up there a little bit. But I also have my education in exercise physiology and exercise science. And so I want to talk about that from my two perspectives, but also go through the article and some of the issues that it raises. And it starts off by talking about some of the people who might be watching this, people who are looking for personal trainers or work with a personal trainer, and how do we make those decisions about who to work with. And unfortunately, a lot of it comes down to how the trainer looks, or if they have pictures of people they've worked with and those transformations, and we pick it based off of that. But we don't really look at their knowledge background and what they know and what they can do, and are they actually the right fit for you. I think we've probably all seen this person before, or maybe even worked with this person if you're a personal trainer yourself, and they have the ripped abs you can see through the shirt, and they kind of strut through the gym, and everyone wants to work with them as a personal trainer, but they may not really know anything. They've worked out themselves, they know how to work out themselves, but they don't know how to scale that for other people. And I know that can be kind of frustrating for some people in this industry. But it's just part of how we think and how we are. We all do that, and we need to be aware of it. But the other things that this article talks about that are more relevant to people who are working in the industry, it starts off with some nutritional misconceptions. And this is something that I go on about quite a bit. If people who know me know this, I don't like discussing nutrition with people because there's a very distinct line that personal trainers cannot cross. And it becomes out of their scope of practice if you make a mistake and someone, say, has an allergic reaction to something that you recommended they eat, anything like that, you can be in a lot of trouble and your insurance isn't going to cover you. So I'm very careful about that line. If someone really needs some nutritional advice, we can give some basic information based on guidelines that are readily available to the public. But beyond that, just prescribing meal plans or setting calories, specific foods, things like that, we need to send a person to a dietitian. But a lot of the reason for that is we're not formally educated in nutrition. And a personal training certification, even some of these nutrition certifications where you become a nutritionist, they're just not enough for you to go out and do to make meal plans for people and do those things for people. You have to have the education, internships, all those things to become a dietitian to do that. And a big reason for that is we look at some of these misconceptions about diet. And personal trainers, they don't know how much protein people should be eating. They don't know if they should be eating carbohydrates or avoiding carbohydrates, or how much fat they can take, what types of fat. These are all things that require an education and someone who's experienced to be able to tell people to do these things. And so we're going to get into a little bit more too about other things with personal trainers and why we need to stay within our scope of practice, but also get better within our scope of practice. So nutrition, I say stay away from it. If you're a personal trainer, I know that everyone does it, and it can be a big part of your job, and people sometimes expect it. But we really need to be conscious of the fact that we don't have the education for it, and we don't know enough to really be prescribing those things. But even when we get to exercise and exercise prescription, a lot of these certifications just are not enough, and this study talks about that, or this article talks a lot about that. There's so many misconceptions around exercise, and they can range from fairly mundane to ones that you would think these people who are professionals in this industry should know. And in fact, one of the surveys that they gave out, they ask very basic questions, things like, can you spot reduce, which is doing an exercise to try to lose fat from one part of the body. So I'm going to do 1,000 crunches a day, hoping I'm going to melt some of that fat off of my stomach. Well, exercise doesn't really work that way. It's more of a global weight loss that we get from exercise. But apparently some personal trainers don't know that. And so their knowledge appears to be very weak when it comes to exercise science in general. Now, does education help this? It appears to some, but there are some troubling things that are brought up in this article that I want to discuss about that. So exercise science degrees are going to help you. There's a couple of reasons for that. One being exposed to people who are knowledgeable and can help clear up some of these myths and misunderstandings. But also, having a degree helps you learn to actually digest incoming information and discern if the information is good or not. So we have good sources, and we have some questionable sources, and we have some bad sources, of course. But even within the sources we might consider good, so scientific literature, we go to PubMed and you find an article, and you might find an article from PubMed that supports your position, but you have to be able to actually look at it and critically analyze it and say, is this actually a good study? Is it published in a good journal? Has it been accepted by the wider community? And is it just one paper that found one result? You'll see that all the time. We find one or two papers that support our position, we run with it. But there might be 50 or 100 papers out there, if we keep looking, that say the opposite. And so we have to have a kind of universal understanding of the information that's out there before really being able to analyze and contextualize a study. And so all these things take years of education and practice and dedication to be able to parse. The other really kind of disturbing thing about this is that they found that people who are getting an exercise science degree, one, as their knowledge increases, they actually become very overconfident in what they know. And so, yeah, they're increasing their knowledge, but their confidence increases much more drastically. And so now they're less likely to go seek out new information, and they're less open to new information than they otherwise might have been. So we get this kind of stagnation from education that can be a little concerning, or very concerning. The other concerning part of this is that when you are exposed to correct information, it doesn't always cause you to correct your misconception. So you might be corrected on something, but you hold on to that incorrect information that you knew before. So say you're a certified personal trainer, you go to get that exercise science degree, the further your career, but you're still holding on to those misconceptions you had from before. And it can be very difficult for us to go back and reassess how we think about something and admit that we're wrong and accept new information. So we have to be very cognizant of that and be open to new information when it comes along. If you're presented with evidence that you're wrong, go ahead and accept it and apply it. And I'll say all the time, it's better to, I sometimes want to know if I'm wrong. I want to be told I'm wrong if I'm wrong, so that I'm no longer wrong. And I can just kind of move on and say, hey, it happens to everyone. Everyone's wrong. I've probably said something wrong in this video already. And we can just accept that and be corrected and move along. So there's a couple of concerning things, and what I want to spend the rest of the video, just a couple of minutes, discussing a couple of these things, like I just said about admitting that we're wrong. I think it can be very powerful in some ways to admit you're wrong. And the other thing is being comfortable with not knowing something. And so many times we almost fake it. Our clients ask us a question, and we have to supply an answer. They're looking at us, they want that answer, and we're not comfortable just saying, hey, I don't know, even if it's the intellectually honest position to take. And I think being comfortable saying I don't know can open you up to a couple of things, because the follow-up to that is, let's go find out. And so if you're not sure about something, go find out. Do the research. Go read the papers. See what you can find out about it. And even if it's something that you've heard and you think, well, I heard this a long time ago, it's a good idea to go make sure you're correct. You could have misunderstood something. You might be misremembering something. So it's a really good idea. Go and read about that and see if you're wrong or if you're right. And maybe you can improve or expand your knowledge on that subject. That happens to me all the time. I get questions from my clients and my customers, and they'll say, hey, why are we doing this the same way? Why are we always working this on this day? Why don't we try something else? And sometimes it's, hey, I was in a rut and I wasn't really thinking about this. I was just going along with what I usually do. And that's a pretty good idea. And I've changed my mind on some things like that. I've changed my mind on several of the systems that we use for looking at how we load our barbells and different things like that. And assess, are we using enough of a load? And so I've looked into some changes there. And so I'm trying to be open about ideas and get better all the time in learning new information. The other big thing is critical thinking. And people complain all the time, oh, we don't teach critical thinking. And I think sometimes we don't even know what critical thinking means. I hear it used in so many different contexts. But really, what critical thinking is what I was talking about a little bit earlier. It's being able to assess information and decide, am I getting good information? How do I assess, assimilate that information, and make decisions based on that? And that can be a difficult process. It's one that has to be not only learned and taught, but actually honed. And so when I was going through my master's and my PhD, we had meetings every week, usually multiple times a week, where we're reading journal articles and we're presenting our ideas and talking about ideas and critiquing each other. You go to a seminar and listen to a speaker present their scientific information, and then people rip them apart. And that's just part of the process, and that's what keeps us intellectually honest. And when you have to do that, it's very uncomfortable, particularly at first. It's hard to admit that we're wrong or that we don't know something, but it helps us to correct. And I'd rather be correct and continue using good information as I move forward than be wrong and just be stubborn. And okay, I'm wrong, but I've dug in my heels, and that's what I'm going to go with. And we're kind of like that with the society. There's the term flip-flopper was big in politics. And if you're in politics and you change your mind on a subject, it becomes commercials. And we don't like people who change their mind all the time. But sometimes it's necessary, and sometimes it's the right thing to do. And so I want to encourage you. That's my encouragement for today, is be okay with I don't know. Be okay with admitting you're wrong and moving on and finding better information. And also, let's just keep trying to figure out, let's keep reading. Don't ever get comfortable in what you know or what you think you know. You always need to be reassessing those things. If you've been doing the same thing for a long time, if you believe something for a long time, go read about it. Go make sure it still holds up. All right. Thank you for listening. See you next time.